I've worked as a ranger at the Green Hollow Wildlife Preserve for almost a decade. It's a government-run operation tucked deep into the Appalachian Mountains, far from civilization. Most people assume it's just another nature reserve, meant to protect endangered species and maintain the ecosystem. But that's only part of the story. The preserve is a lot older than its official establishment, and some of the creatures we're tasked with monitoring don't show up in biology textbooks. My job, my specific job, is to tag the ones we don't talk about publicly, the ones that shouldn't exist. I joined the preserve after being discharged from the army. An incident overseas left me haunted, desperate for a way to disappear. The preserve seemed like the perfect place, a job where isolation was part of the deal, where my past could fade into the quiet hum of the forest. Over time, I learned that isolation came with its own challenges. The things I've seen here, things I'm not allowed to document anywhere but in encrypted reports, would make even the toughest skeptics question their sanity. 2 weeks ago, I was called in for a high-priority tagging operation. A predator, bigger and smarter than anything on our registry, had been spotted on the preserve's remote cameras. It moved like a wolf but had an almost feline grace, and its eyes reflected light in a way no natural animals should. Most disturbing was the way it avoided every trap we set, as if it knew what they were. The mission was clear: tag it for tracking and release it back into the wild. No killing, no capturing, just tag and release. I found it deep in the forest, near an old cave system. It had taken down a deer, its jaws dripping with blood. My team was a few yards behind me, ready with tranq rifles. When it noticed us, it locked eyes with me. For a moment, I froze. Those eyes weren't animal. They were almost human, filled with an intelligence that sent a chill down my spine. "It's a skinwalker," I said to my team as they lined it up in their sights. The tranquilizers took effect after a short chase. I approached the creature cautiously as it lay breathing heavily on the forest floor. Up close, it was even more disturbing. Mottled fur, elongated limbs, and claws that looked like they could shred through steel. When I pressed the tracking tag into its thick hide, its eyes flicked open for just a second and focused on me. That was the moment I felt something wrong, something alive about the connection between us. I chalked it up to nerves. We let it go, per protocol. And for a while, I thought that was the end of it. But last night, everything changed. It started with the silence. No birds, no insects, not even the rustling of leaves in the wind. Just an oppressive, unnatural stillness that pressed against the walls of my office. I was going over some reports when I heard it, the faint sound of claws clicking against the tile floor. My stomach dropped. I turned toward the doorway. Standing there, illuminated by the cold glow of fluorescent lights, was the skinwalker I had tagged 2 weeks ago. Only now, it was standing upright, its elongated limbs twisted into a grotesque imitation of a man. Its eyes, those same intelligent, human-like eyes, burned with malice. "Hello, Ranger," it said. Its voice was a low rasp, like wind scraping through dead branches. I scrambled to my feet, knocking my chair over in the process. My instinct was to reach for my sidearm, but I froze when it stepped forward. "Do you know what you've done?" It growled. "That tag you put on me. It's not just a tracker, it's a beacon." "A beacon?" I managed to choke out. The creature's grin revealed teeth that were far too sharp. "For them," it snarled, "the ones who hunt my kind, the ancient ones. They've felt the signal, and they're coming." "You're lying," I said, though I didn't believe it. My voice wavered, betraying me. "Do I look like I'm lying?" It hissed, stepping closer. "Your tag has doomed us both, and if you want to survive, you'll do exactly as I say." It didn't take long for the signs to appear. The forest began to change. The trees seemed to lean closer together, their branches twisting unnaturally. The air grew thick, humming with an eerie vibration that set my teeth on edge. Animals fled the area in droves, and those that stayed behind, deer, raccoons, even birds, acted strangely, their movements jerky and unnatural. The skinwalker stayed close, its movements silent and predatory. It was clear that it hated me as much as it feared the hunters. "There's a facility," it said as we trudged through the dense forest. "Deep in the preserve. You and your kind built it to contain something. Something worse than me. What are you talking about? I asked. The beast, it growled. It's the only thing that can stop the hunters. If we don't release it, we're both dead. I stopped in my tracks. No. Whatever's in that facility is locked away for a reason. The skinwalker's grin widened. And what reason do you think they had for keeping me alive? You think your employers are innocent in all this? It leaned in close, its breath rancid. You don't have a choice. The skinwalker elaborated as we continued. The hunters, they don't stop. They're not like your kind, killing for sport or necessity. They erase everything. Me, you, this forest. Whatever they touch, they consume. The beast is our only chance to stop them. And what is this beast? I demanded. Older than you can imagine, it said. It was here long before the preserve, long before your kind walked these woods. Your people found it, studied it, caged it. They think it's dormant. It's not. And you want to unleash that? You'll unleash it, it said coldly. You think I can open its cage? You think I'd risk being its first victim? No. This is your doing, Ranger. You set the beacon, you wake the beast. The skinwalker's demeanor shifted as we trudged forward. Its usual predatory arrogance gave way to a quiet intensity. It began whispering things under its breath, things I couldn't understand but sent shivers down my spine. At one point, it stopped dead in its tracks, sniffing the air. They're close, it said, voice barely audible. We're running out of time. We reached the facility after hours of navigating the warped forest. It was a concrete fortress, surrounded by rusting fences and long-dead security cameras. The air around the building seemed heavier, almost oppressive, as if the forest itself was recoiling from what lay within. The entrance was sealed with a heavy steel door, but the skinwalker moved with unsettling confidence, guiding me to a hidden panel covered in moss. You knew about this? I asked, watching it swipe its claws across the panel to expose a keypad. I've been here before, it replied. Long ago, before your kind built walls to keep the beast contained. The door groaned open, revealing a dark hallway lined with flickering lights. Inside, the air was colder, carrying the sterile smell of disinfectant and decay. The walls were lined with reinforced glass, and through them I glimpsed horrors I could barely comprehend. Malformed creatures suspended in tanks, their bodies twitching faintly as if dreaming. Some were animals, twisted versions of species I recognized, but others were unidentifiable, monstrous amalgamations of limbs, teeth, and eyes. What is this place? I whispered. Your people call it research, the skinwalker said, sneering. I call it desecration. It led me deeper into the facility, past rooms filled with rusting equipment and cryptic notes scrawled on the walls. The humming in the air grew louder, almost deafening, as we approached a massive containment chamber at the end of the corridor. The door to the chamber was reinforced with layers of steel and covered in warning signs written in multiple languages. A single observation window offered a glimpse inside. I hesitated, my heart pounding. What's in there? See for yourself, the skinwalker said, its grin returning. Through the window, I saw the shadow of something enormous, its form shifting and writhing as though it couldn't decide what shape to take. It was too large, too unnatural, to fully comprehend. My mind struggled to process the sheer wrongness of it. The creature exuded a sense of malevolence that made my skin crawl. There's no way we can control that, I said. If we let it out. It's not about control, the skinwalker interrupted. It's about survival. The hunters will destroy everything unless we give them something else to fear. As we approached the controls for the chamber, the skinwalker's urgency grew. Do it now, it hissed, before it's too late. My hands shook as I keyed in the override code, one I'd been trained never to use. The chamber hissed and groaned as the locks disengaged. Inside, the shadow moved faster, a low growl reverberating through the facility. The skinwalker stepped back, its grin widening. The creature emerged slowly, its towering frame barely fitting through the chamber door. Its form shifted constantly, pieces of shadowy flesh dissolving and reforming into claws, tendrils, and skeletal structures. Its eyes burned like molten gold, fixing on me as it stepped forward. Each of its footsteps sent shockwaves through the floor, cracks spiderwebbing outward. The beast leaned down, its breath scorching the air between us. Its growl was a low, guttural vibration that seemed to bypass my ears and settle deep in my chest. I froze, my instincts screaming to run, but my legs wouldn't move. The skinwalker whispered, "Don't move," though its voice shook with fear. The beast tilted its massive head, studying me with an almost curious malice. My heart pounded as it extended one enormous claw, the tip hovering inches from my face. Its molten eyes narrowed as though weighing its options. My breath caught in my throat. Then it stopped. Its head jerked toward the far end of the facility, its body going rigid. A snarl erupted from deep within its chest, shaking the walls. It turned from me abruptly, its entire form coiling as if preparing for war. "They're here," the skinwalker whispered, and for the first time, I saw genuine fear in its eyes. The beast roared, an earth-shattering sound that felt like it could tear the facility apart. The walls cracked, lights shattered, and the air grew impossibly thick. The hunters had arrived. The beast's roar had barely faded when the first signs of the hunters' arrival became apparent. The air seemed to ripple, as though reality itself was struggling to hold together. A suffocating pressure pressed down on my chest, making it hard to breathe. The skinwalker backed into the shadows, its confidence cracking as the oppressive energy filled the facility. "They're closer than I thought," it hissed, its glowing eyes darting toward the entrance. The beast, the monstrous, shifting thing we had just unleashed, turned toward the distant vibrations in the air, as if it could sense them through space and time. It let out another guttural growl, lower this time, and began moving with deliberate, thunderous steps toward the far end of the facility. "We need to move," the skinwalker snapped, grabbing my arm. Its claws pressed painfully into my skin, but I was too stunned to resist. "If they corner it here, we'll be caught in the crossfire. And trust me, you don't want to be collateral damage." But my eyes were locked on the beast. As it passed through the crumbling hallway, its form seemed to flicker. One moment, it was a hulking, shadowy mass with glowing runes etched across its flesh. The next, it became something skeletal, its limbs impossibly long and jagged, dragging against the walls. My mind struggled to keep up with its shifting, as if it couldn't decide what it was supposed to be. When it reached the end of the corridor, it stopped abruptly, its molten eyes fixed on something I couldn't yet see. The shadows around it deepened, and the walls seemed to warp and buckle. The air froze, and a low, resonating hum filled the space. The lights overhead flickered and then died completely, plunging us into darkness. The only illumination came from the beast's glowing runes, which now pulsed like a heartbeat. Then they appeared. The hunters stepped into view as though emerging from the folds of reality itself. Their forms were impossibly tall and thin, draped in shifting cloaks of darkness that seemed to consume the light around them. Their faces, if they had faces, were blank voids, smooth and featureless, yet somehow unbearably watchful. They moved with an unsettling grace, their footsteps silent despite the crumbling debris beneath them. One of them raised a long, spindly arm, and a faint, glowing sigil appeared in the air. The sigil pulsed with an eerie green light, casting distorted shadows across the walls. The beast's roar shook the facility again, but this time, it sounded almost defensive, as if it recognized the power these creatures wielded. "They're trying to bind it," the skinwalker whispered, its voice barely audible over the rumbling around us. "We have to move, now!" The beast's response was as sudden as it was violent. With a roar that seemed to tear at the fabric of reality itself, it lunged at the nearest hunter. Its massive claws sliced through the air, but the hunter moved with impossible speed, evading the attack as though it had seen it coming long before it happened. Another hunter raised its arm, and tendrils of dark energy shot forward, wrapping around the beast's limbs and torso. For a moment, it struggled, its shifting form flickering violently, as if trying to break free. The struggle between the beast and the hunters sent shockwaves through the facility. Walls crumbled, glass shattered, and the twisted creatures in the containment tanks began to stir. One by one, the tanks ruptured, releasing horrors that had been trapped for who knows how long. Grotesque hybrids of animals and humans, malformed and screaming, spilled into the chaos, attacking anything that moved. "This place is coming apart," the skinwalker growled, pulling me toward a side corridor. "You want to live? Keep moving." But my feet wouldn't obey. My gaze was fixed on the battle ahead. The hunters were relentless, their glowing sigils pulsing in unison as they worked to contain the beast. But the beast was stronger than I had anticipated. With a deafening roar, it tore through the tendrils binding it, sending shockwaves that threw the hunters back. The ground beneath us cracked, and a fissure split the hallway, forcing us to jump to safety. We stumbled into a secondary corridor, away from the main battle. My ears rang, and my legs felt like jelly, but the skinwalker dragged me forward with an almost desperate urgency. "You knew this would happen," I spat, wrenching my arm free. "You knew it wasn't about survival. This is revenge, isn't it?" The skinwalker turned to me, its glowing eyes narrowing. "Revenge? You think I'm doing this out of spite?" It leaned closer, its rancid breath filling the space between us. "You don't understand. This isn't about you. It's not even about me. The hunters don't just kill. They erase. They consume everything. Your kind, mine, the forest, this world. The beast is the only thing strong enough to stop them." "And what happens if it wins?" I shot back. "What happens to us?" The skinwalker's grin returned, sharp and cruel. "That's the price of survival, Ranger. You should have thought about that before you set the beacon." The battle between the beast and the hunter spilled out into the forest. Trees twisted and cracked as the beast's massive form barreled through the undergrowth, its molten eyes glowing in the darkness. The hunters pursued relentlessly, their sigils carving glowing patterns into the sky. The forest itself seemed to warp under their presence, the ground splitting and reforming as though the land were trying to escape the carnage. We followed at a distance, the skinwalker leading me through the chaos with an unnerving familiarity. It seemed to know exactly where to go, weaving through the warped terrain as though it had walked these paths before. "We're not safe here," I said, glancing over my shoulder at the destruction behind us. "The beast will tear everything apart." "It already has," the skinwalker replied. "But if it takes the hunters with it, that's a price worth paying." Ahead, the forest opened into a clearing, and I saw it. The beast, towering over the hunters as they circled it. Their sigils pulsed brighter, their dark tendrils lashing out to ensnare the creature once more. But the beast fought back with ferocity, its form shifting into a whirlwind of claws and shadow, tearing through the tendrils as fast as they appeared. I stopped at the edge of the clearing, my chest heaving. The skinwalker stepped forward, its eyes fixed on the battle ahead. "This is it," it said. "The end of everything or the beginning of something worse. Let's see which one you choose." The clearing was a battleground waiting to erupt. The beast stood in the center, its towering, shifting form pulsating with a menacing energy. Molten runes carved into its shadowy flesh flared brighter as it roared a challenge to the hunters. They surrounded it, their tall, skeletal forms draped in flowing liquid-like darkness. Their faces remained smooth voids, but their attention was palpable, suffocating and deliberate. Sigils floated above their hands, twisting and glowing in eerie synchronization. The hunters began their work. Moving in unison, they traced glowing runes into the air. These sigils wove together into a massive web, forming a dome-like structure around the beast. The sigils burned brighter, their glow spreading through the clearing like wildfire, twisting the very air. The beast's roar faltered, and its limbs writhed as though weighed down by invisible chains. The trap was closing. But the beast was not done yet. With a deafening bellow, it lunged forward, swiping its massive claws at one of the hunters. The impact sent shockwaves through the ground, shattering the sigils around it. The hunter's form dissolved into mist, but seconds later it reformed, whole and untouched. The beast roared again, more frustrated this time. It didn't understand. These weren't physical enemies. The hunters weren't fighting. They were containing. The sigils grew brighter, their pulsating rhythm now like a beating heart. The forest around the clearing began to shift, the trees bending unnaturally, their branches intertwining into grotesque shapes. The hunters advanced, closing the circle tighter. As the hunters and the beast clashed, the clearing turned into a nightmare. The energy from their battle rippled outward, corrupting the forest. Trees split open, their bark twisting into claw-like protrusions. Glowing fissures spread across the ground, pulsing with an unnatural red light. Creatures caught in the crossfire, deer, birds, even insects, transformed into grotesque hybrids, their bodies warping into unnatural shapes as they screeched and howled in agony. The beast's rage grew. It shifted its form wildly, sprouting new limbs and jagged spines that tore through the glowing web of sigils. Its claws struck the ground, sending shockwaves that uprooted trees and flung dirt and debris into the air. One hunter raised its arm, summoning shadowy constructs that took the shape of massive wolves. The constructs leapt at the beast, their fangs glowing with the same energy as the sigils. The beast tore them apart, but more replaced them. From the edge of the clearing, I watched in awe and horror. The skinwalker crouched beside me, its glowing eyes flickering with a mixture of fear and determination. "This is their power," it said, its voice low. "They don't fight to win, they fight to erase." A crack split the air as another sigil materialized above the hunters. This one was massive, its light so intense it burned the edges of my vision. The beast reeled, its form shrinking momentarily under the weight of the hunters' combined power. The beast let out a roar that seemed to shake the entire forest. Its molten eyes burned brighter as it pushed back against the hunters. Its shifting form grew larger, more monstrous. Wings of shadow erupted from its back, their jagged edges slicing through the glowing tendrils binding it. With a deafening bellow, it unleashed a wave of energy that tore through the clearing, scattering the hunters like leaves in a storm. The hunters faltered, their sigils flickering. But then, one of them stepped forward. It was taller than the others, its form more solid, more menacing. Its sigils burned brighter, and the shadows around it seemed to writhe with life. It raised both arms, and a colossal rune formed in the sky, pulsing with blinding light. The forest groaned as the rune began draining its energy, the life force of everything around it feeding into the hunter's trap. The beast stumbled, its form flickering as the rune's energy sapped its strength. I turned to the skinwalker, who was clutching something in its clawed hands. It handed me the artifact, a jagged, glowing device that hummed with unstable energy. "This is it," it said. "You can stop them, but you have to choose." The beast roared again, its form convulsing as it tried to fight back. It lunged at the lead hunter, but the colossal rune in the sky flared, throwing it back with an explosive burst of energy. The hunters tightened their formation, their movements synchronized as they prepared to deliver the final blow. I gripped the artifact, its energy surging through me. I could feel its power, raw, chaotic, and dangerous. The skinwalker watched me intently, its glowing eyes narrowing. "You can turn it on them," it said. "Destroy the hunters, let the beast finish the job, or..." It hesitated, then sneered. "You're thinking of sealing it, aren't you? Do you think you'll survive that?" My mind raced. The forest was dying. The beast was uncontrollable. The hunters were unstoppable. There was only one option. I sprinted toward the center of the clearing, dodging debris and the warped creatures that snarled at my heels. The beast turned its burning eyes toward me, its massive form trembling under the weight of the hunter's trap. The lead hunter raised its arms, the colossal rune glowing brighter as it prepared to deliver the killing blow. I activated the artifact. A blinding light erupted from it, and the energy surged toward the beast and the hunters alike. The artifact's power consumed everything, its chaotic energy tearing through the sigils, the shadows, and the beast itself. The ground beneath me shattered, and I was thrown backward as the light engulfed the clearing. When I opened my eyes, the clearing was silent. The hunters were gone, their shadowy forms erased by the artifact's power. The forest was eerily still, its warped trees frozen in unnatural shapes. In the center of the clearing, where the beast had stood, there was nothing but a faint, glowing crater. The skinwalker was gone. Whether it had escaped or been consumed by the artifact's power, I couldn't tell. I staggered to my feet, my body aching, my mind numb. The forest was dying. The energy from the battle had drained it of life. The trees were withered, the ground cracked and barren. I knew the preserve would never recover. As I turned to leave, I felt a faint, lingering presence, a whisper in the wind, a shadow at the edge of my vision. The beast's essence, or perhaps the hunter's, was still there, watching, waiting. I knew this wasn't over. I walked away from the clearing. The artifacts remained still humming faintly in my hands. The world had been spared, but at what cost? The forest was gone. The beast was sealed. And I was left with the knowledge that some battles don't end. They only pause, waiting for the next move. Thanks for watching. Hope you enjoyed the video. If you did, please like and subscribe, or even leave a comment.